Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Drew. I'm an exercise physiologist and a Chinese medicine practitioner who I specialize in musculoskeletal rehabilitation and postural restoration using classical Chinese medicine rehabilitation, acupuncture, qigong techniques in conjunction with modern exercise science understanding of the human body and how it works, and kind of sit that nice kind of Venn diagram of utilizing both. And in this series, we've been looking at functional anatomy. And the reason we look at functional anatomy is because it gives us a really good understanding and fundamental basis from which to apply our toolkit of exercise, rehabilitation, of manual therapies, or whether that's an acupuncture, dry needling, there is a difference. Manual techniques like PNF, ART, Postural Restoration Institute techniques, soft tissue work, neurological activation, all the things, all the tools. Got so many ways we can help treat the human body. But the fundamentals is you've got to know the human body at the kind of like the anatomy level, because it explains a lot of what's going on. It's not the whole picture, but it certainly helps. So in today's video, we're looking at the lower limb. We're looking at the deep posterior compartment, which comprises really three main muscles, which will be these three bad boys here. So we have the tibialis posterior, one of the most important muscles in the body. Then we have the Flexor Digitorum Longus, and then we also have the Flexor Hallicus Longus, which is your big toe muscle. And as always, I'm using the Complete Anatomy app, which is an amazing app to learn about anatomy. And I'm just going to be kind of like skipping on the surface of what you can do with this app. So I highly recommend you go and grab it. I'm not affiliated with them. I'm not paid by them to do that. I just think it's a really amazing tool to use. So if you're interested in anatomy, you want to learn more, this is a great tool for you to use it. And someone like me actually helps to kind of explain what all the bits and pieces do based on my own personal experience and what I do. So let's break down these three muscles first, and then we're going to look also at the plantar fascia, so underneath the foot, and then how these kind of work together in terms of ankle mobility or foot use. So let's start with the tibialis posterior. And we've got this really cool function where we can isolate. So we click that. We can just isolate the muscle on its own. It's pretty cool. And so the tib posterior really, it starts up on here in the kind of like the medial, the kind of lateral but medial tibial border. Lateral on the outside, but it's really almost coming down the posterior innermost edge of the lateral border. So you come around from the front. So it's not on the anterior, it's on this kind of lateral edge down here. And it's going to connect to that interosseous membrane. So remember, we've got this connective tissue that goes all the way between the fibula and tibia, all the way down. So it's going to fascially connect to that. And it basically attaches along the whole shaft of the tibia. And then you can see the tendon starts to form kind of in the lower two-thirds, and then forms into the tendon, hooks around the medial malleolus, and there's a nice groove there in the bone where it hooks around. Okay. Kind of comes past the talus, which is this flat bone here, and then it's going to hook in to these two bones here. So this one's the navicular, and here we've got the medial cuneiform, and that's going to be the first metatarsal of the big toe through there. And then it spreads out, and it pretty much attaches onto all the bones of the foot underneath, if directly or indirectly via connective tissue and fascia. So this is the arch support muscle. If this muscle is weak, then your arch won't be supported, and typically you'll often get a collapse. And what we mean by arch is you have this arch in the foot. Okay. When you have a clapped arch, this, instead of having this curve, is basically flat. And so you don't get the shock absorption function of the foot slings, the fascial slings, and all these muscles come down the back leg that support the foot. So really, really important that we get this muscle functional via strengthening exercises, particularly. Stretching this muscle on its own is pretty much a waste of time. You need to strengthen the bad boy up because it's got to tolerate the loading coming up through the ground. all the ground reaction forces. So there was this guy called Newton, and he came up with these kind of principles in biomechanics, and one's called for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when you heel strike down, or when you plant down into the ground, whatever force you push down into the earth with your foot comes back up into your body. Okay. So for example, if you put 100 Newton meters or newtons of force into the ground, it's probably not the right term, but you get the idea. It's been a while since I did biomechanics. You're going to get 100 come back up into your leg. So your body's connective tissue needs to be strong enough to absorb and tolerate those forces coming up and down the leg. And this is kind of how you get kind of biomechanical wear and tear on tissue structures. So if we go back, this is why we have its kind of little brother. Yeah, so let's have a look at our Flexor Digitorum Longus. So this one's touching more on the posterior surface of the tibia, inferior to the soleus line. So that's the soleus line here, coming down. All right. Inserts in the planar aspect of the base of the distal phalanges of the second, third, fourth, and little toes. So digitorum means digits, toes. So it's going to go down, if we isolate this bad boy, the second, third, fourth, and fifth toes. So the tendon comes around, hooks around the lateral malleolus, goes past the talus, goes past the navicular, just kind of underneath the navicular here, hooks in this kind of nice space between the heel bone, the calcaneus, and the navicular here, and then spreads out into the toes and connects to the toes. So that's your gripping muscle, if you will, for your toes. So when you're doing balance exercise, for example, one technique you do is you want to just spread your feet out, your toes out, and then just gently pad down. But don't curl, but you just kind of gently press down. And that's kind of like Spider-Man. It's going to give you that kind of grip. And then we come back and we look at Flexor Hallicus. All right, so coming off the head of the fibula, okay, and then it comes down the back. Essentially, very similar line of the other two tendons, maybe a little bit more posterior. Hooks around underneath the talus. See, there's a little groove in the talus, so it's kind of like it gets stuck in the groove there. And then shoots underneath, goes under the tendon of the tib post, and then goes to your big toe. So if you isolate that bad boy, all the way under to your big toe. Now, essentially, these three muscles are a team and they work together. You cannot really isolate them. I know people like to say they do, but it's kind of rubbish. You really can't isolate them individually. You basically, what you do is you put the foot in a certain position where this group is in this most optimal position to contract and relax. And then you work the different ranges of movement of the big toe and the little toes, and the different kind of joints of the tarsals and the metatarsals. Okay, and then the talus and the calcaneus, which makes that kind of roll, and then the talus and the tibia, which makes the hinge. So the ankle's got this component of, it's got hinging, which is the ankle joint, or technically that's the talotibial joint, where the two bones meet. I mean, even more technically, you could probably call it the talofibulotibial joint, because three bones are making that joint there. And that's the hinge. So that movement there, so we have to make sure that movement's working. And then we have where the talus sits on top of the calcaneus. Okay, that's the heel bone. That's the talus. Those two, and these two bones create the roll. So they create the roll, or inversion and eversion. Okay. So in this case, for example, when the little toe rolls out, that's eversion, and when your big toe rolls in, or the sole of the foot rolls in, that's inversion. And then you have abduction and adduction of the foot, which comes through these joints through here, all these joints through here, this kind of line, and that gives you a little bit of this kind of movement, ab and adduction. And when you combine kind of dorsiflexion, plantar flexion from the hinge joint at the ankle, and then inversion, eversion from the talar calcaneal joint, and then abduction from the toes, basically, and the foot joints. You get pronation, supination. So pronation, supination are those kind of combined movements that we work with. So you can't isolate these individual muscles, but you put the foot in certain positions of angles where it really helps facilitate the muscles to work and facilitates a really good job. Then you've got to use your mind-muscle connection, because skeletal muscle is under voluntary control through the prefrontal cortex regions which control muscular contraction. So you can, with practice, kind of like squeeze and relax and put your mind in the muscle and kind of feel the muscle working, you can kind of palpate it, and it helps people kind of reconnect the nervous system to the muscle so they start to fire, and then that way you can retrain it. So you have to be really, really intentional. You have to concentrate. You have to know where you're trying to contract and what the movement you're trying to create is. And then you have to be patient and very persistent to allow the body to retrain and adapt to whatever injury or thing that you're trying to do. We also have this little bad boy underneath the foot. This is Flexor Digitorum brevis. So this bad boy attaches to the calcaneus, that's the heel bone there. So if we look at the attachment point, medial process of the calcaneal tuberosity and planta aponeurosis. So the calcaneal tuberosity is that bone, that sticky out bit of green bone there. So remember, tuberosities are where tendons tend to attach. And the calcaneal tuberosity, the calcaneal, go back to the actual right thing. The plantar aponeurosis is that, okay, which is your plantar fascia. So essentially, the plantar fascia sits just below and kind of wraps around the digitorum brevis. All right. And it's this point here where a lot of folks get plantar fasciitis. Okay. And they can get this real irritation on here because this little muscle is doing, for whatever reason, doing way too much work than it needs to do. And it's pulling on the bone, and this tendon gets irritated, or you get a little bursitis that's formed underneath it, and it gets really, really painful. I'm actually working with a client who's got, at the moment, this on both sides. And the reason this guy's got it on both sides, he, for some reason, thought it was a good idea to start doing 10K runs with a 10-kilo weight vest, which is fine, but he didn't go from 0 to 500 meters to 1 kilometer. He went from 0 to 10Ks. And after a couple of weeks, he started getting heel pain, and then he just ran through it, and then one heel turned into 2 heels, and now we're trying to like manage this, which is, it's definitely treatable. We've got onto it a little bit quicker than average bear would probably get onto it, but it's going to take a while. We're going to have to deload this tissue and then treat the inflammation first, get this under control, then we have to retrain and look at why this part of the foot's getting overworked. And I'm going to guess with this particular guy that it's because his calves are very weak. We'll get back to that at some point. So you don't want to get plantar fasciitis. That is the key thing. So the plantar fascia here, big, strong connective tissue. It's like the ITB band of your foot, and it's going to go into all your toes. All right. Very, 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 very strong. And there are other layers of fascia here as well, and then other muscles, but this is the primary one. So with that one and the Flexor Digitorum brevis, they work together. And then you have the Tibialis Posterior, the Flexor Extensor Digitorum, and the Flexor Hallicus Longus, all working to support the arch of the foot. So if this kind of like group is weak, then you're going to get all kinds of problems. And when it's weak, what's going to happen is your foot's going to get stuck in inversion. And I'm going to show you what inversion looks like now. So we go to function, motion. Jasmine T while it loads. All right, here we go. this is your tibialis posterior. When it contracts, it turns orange. So that means the muscle is contracting and pulling, pulls on the tendon. Anywhere the tendon attaches to the bone, it's going to pull on the bone and it's going to make the joint move. And first thing we notice here is we're getting this talus and calcaneal roll that I was talking about. So this is the inversion roll where we actually create a gap here. Okay. From the front, inversion, 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 stop there. So you can see that the foot is rolled out or up. So the big toe is, in this case, it looks like it's up in the air, but what will happen will be as you invert foot, you're going to roll onto that big toe. So you're going to actually be putting your weight onto this big toe. It's a little bit difficult to visualize here. So as you're coming through, you're going to be basically putting your weight onto your big toe in this angle there. Right. Then as you push off, the calf muscles, the bigger calf muscles, the gastrocnemius is going to be attaching onto the calcaneus here in the soleus. They're going to be pulling up. And so that kind of propels you forward. And that whole kind of mechanism works together to kind of push your foot forward. So because the foot's going to be behind you, as you toe off, it's going to push you forward. So that's walking, that's gait. So the stronger this mechanism is, the better your walking will be, or your running particularly. Now, this is where the muscle is short and tight, okay, or fully contracted. If your muscle goes the other way, here, this is more neutral, right? So here we still have our neutral arch of the foot. This is what we want. The calcaneus and the talus have returned back together. Okay. Now those two joints, once they kind of roll back onto each other, they can't really go any further. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. Their pieces are end to end, so they can't move. What can happen over time, and it takes a long time for it to occur, is if for whatever reason these muscles become weak, then the supporting muscles underneath don't contract enough to stabilize this arch. And then that kind of fascia and that flexor brevis muscle underneath takes on more load, and they after a while they start to get stretched out because as you can imagine, the loading coming down the leg is coming down this way, and the weight of the foot is just slightly more across the midline here. So your center of gravity typically comes through here, this region through the middle of your foot. Okay. In Chinese medicine, we have an acupuncture point called kidney 1. So kidney 1 is about here typically. All right. And so if you measure when you're in stance position, so when you're standing, okay, if you draw a line, so in the middle of your acetobulofemoral joint, so your hip joint, if you draw a line right in the middle, and then just plumb line straight down, it should go right through the middle of your knee. That should go right through the middle of your knee, and then come right through the ankle, middle of the ankle, and then right through the middle of the foot. And then when you do it from the side, you kind of like visualize that line coming straight down. It's going to come down through here somewhere. Everyone's slightly different. So this is the center of gravity of your body. When you are standing, like when we do our Tai Chi or Qigong movements, one of the first things you learn is how to center your way through this kidney 1 acupuncture point, which is typically right in here. Yeah. So when I do rehab with people with their feet, what I'm trying to do is get people to create an arch so they can center their weight of their gravity through this point, so that the whole biomechanical forces are balanced through the whole chain. So it's a whole postural thing. If, for example, if you get lower back issues, which changes the pelvis orientation. It can change the center of gravity on the foot, and that can change the loading. So there's lots of reasons why, if you think about the whole body and what can happen in the body, why the actual loading coming down the foot might suddenly change, and then you still get these subtle differences, and then all of a sudden the foot's taking extra loading. So we get this flattening or weakening of the arch, and what will happen is that this whole arch basically flattens out. Okay. So these muscles get stretched, and when a muscle is stretched and it's in its lengthened position, it's really, really weak. So when muscles contract and relax, when they contract, they pull across each other like that, and this is called cross bridging. Okay, and there's this thing called active and passive insufficiency. So active insufficiency is where the muscles contract and they contract at the full length, but they've got nowhere else to go because they're fully contracted. So they're actually very, very strong at the end range of that contraction. That's their maximum contraction capacity, but they can't go any further. So that's their basically your range. And then when you relax and you lengthen the muscle out, it returns back to its resting position, wherever that will be. But you don't have as much fibers to actually hook and pull, because it's like a little ratchet system when we look at the muscle fibers. So there's not as much connection there for it to generate force and to pull versus here. Right? And what happens in a collapsed arch is that those deep compartment muscles, they get stretched all the way. So they're just kind of like hanging on by the skin of their threads, if you will. And so they can't really generate much force. So, and when that happens, you know, like for example, the Achilles tendon is designed to take 10 to 14 times your body weight in force. All right. So if you weigh 100 kilos, that tendon needs to be able to tolerate, you know, 1 ton of, you know, joint reaction forces coming up through your leg. It's a lot. And if these muscles are weakened to such a degree that they can't even generate force to basically even contract because they're just lengthened out, there's no way they're going to resist those forces. So what happens then is that all the ligaments and all the actual joints themselves take the loading, okay, and it puts a lot of pressure on them, on the structures, and then you can get all kinds of irritation and joint pain pretty much anywhere in any of these foot joints. And when that happens, when it gets pretty severe, you know, you might need to go and see a podiatrist to get the foot mobilized, to assess which structures are being interfered with, because it's a very, very complex region of the body. But from a movement perspective, what we want to do is retrain this tib posterior to support the arch. Okay, so we want this nice inversion, eversion. Okay. We want that roll. So here, when you roll, so imagine you're standing up, you put your heel on the ground, you bring your weight forward onto your big toe, and then as you push off the big toe, you get this nice kind of roll through the ankle. We want that roll. Okay. Really, really important. We come back here and we put back our tibialis posterior. Let me do that for a second. Anterior posterior. Back at tib anterior, we can see now that we've got the tib anterior essentially coming. Oh, sometimes complete anatomy can get a bit clunky. Okay, here, so we have tib anterior coming down onto our first metatarsal and medial cuneiform, and then we have our tibialis posterior attaching to our navicular here, and then this under it, our medial cuneiform, and then into the plantar fascia itself. So the tib anterior and tib posterior are basically next to each other, and they're pulling up on essentially the center of the arch to maintain that support. So if you want really happy functional feet, what you need to focus on is a lot of work on the tib anterior and the tib posterior, or probably more importantly, the anterior compartment and the posterior compartment, because these are the ones that give you the ankle stability, ankle roll and control. And then once you've got those working well, then you build up the gastrocnemius and the sleeves, which are the power muscles of the lower foot and the ankle. And they're the ones that are going to make you move really, really well. Okay. All right. So let's have a look at our big toe movement. So isolate. So we're going to go back to our big toe, our Flexor Hallicus Longus muscle. And let's do its motion. Big toe flexion. So you can see these muscles, they're working together to contract. And then they curl the toe under. So it's kind of like a gripping of the foot. Same as when you do a grip of a finger. So when you curl your fingers, that's finger flexion. When you straighten them out, that's finger extension. Same thing with the toes. When you curl your toes under, that's toe flexion. Yeah. And then when you straighten them out, that's toe extension. So let's curl. And you can see here, it's going to pull up. So this long, long, long tendon coming up from our Flexor Hallicus, touching on the different parts of the tarsals, first tarsals. And at the same time, when it contracts, we have our Flexor Digitorum Longus muscle contracting. We have our Flexor Digitorum Brevis muscle contracting, all at the same time to work. We have our quadratus plantara muscle here contracting, so that's another one of those foot muscles. We've got multiple layers on the feet, which these muscles all need to be trained, and they are all trainable. Okay. And the secret to being training them is to really work on your toe range. So flexing and extending the toes, straightening the toes, curling the toes, one toe, big toe at a time. And a little party trick you can do is like try to get someone to just extend like their second toe or the third toe and not move the other ones, which is kind of structurally impossible because they're connected to the same tendon. So if you kind of like hold one down, the other ones won't move. It's pretty cool. Just because they're connected to the same tendon. So look at all these muscles all up through here, which are all used in the toe movement. When you're doing things like calf raises, so in a calf raise, you're going to come up and your toes are going to be fully extended. So they're going to be folded the other way. But as you come down in a calf raise, these muscles are going to be lengthening eccentrically. So essentially, that's eccentric lengthening here. So as you lower your heel down in a calf raise, these muscles get stretched eccentrically. So what that means is as your heel dropping down, the muscles are lengthening. And when you do it with control, the ratcheting is still happening. And you can generate a lot of strength with slow eccentric lengthening. So slow heel drops down. Okay. And it's one of the best ways to actually train these muscles properly. Now the trick, if you're doing the heel or the D compartment, is you want to have a slight flexion in the knee, a slight knee bend. Because otherwise what happens is you get the bigger muscles of the gastrocnemius. You get these bad boys kicking in. So these are the gastrocs, the big powerful muscle. It sits above the deep posterior compartment. Okay, and that's the movement muscle there. So if we have a look at its movement. Go back on that. Oh, that looks cool. Doesn't seem to have a motion for this one for some reason. Back. There you go, motion. so here we have full plantar flexion. So think calf raise. The only difference in the calf raise is when you come up in the calf raise, you're going to be hinging on your toe line. Okay, so this is your big toe, second toe, third toe, fourth toe, fifth toe. So you're going to be hinging on this toe line. So this toe is going to be actually bent this way into, like it's going to be doing that, right? So you're going to get this toe, like your toe is going to fold over. So at the moment in this position here, this is fully flexed. And to be fully flexed, you'd actually get the toes curling under. This is more neutral. Okay. But here you're going to have the toes extended, and that's going to be not quite the full range that you want, but it's functional because that's how you walk. Right? So this muscle here will be stretched out more. So as you drop down into your heel raise, as you come down, okay, so that's neutral. But remember in dorsiflexion, we've got probably, we want at least 20 degrees. I would like to get to 40 degrees. So when we get to 40 degrees, you're going to get a lot more stretch through these muscles and tendons. And the key to isolate between, the deep compartment and the gastroc and the SLES is just to slightly bend your knee. So when you slightly flex your knee, so just kind of unlock your knee a little bit, that puts this muscle in a slightly more relaxed position. So you tend to get more work in the lower limb, in the deep compartment and the intrinsic muscles of the foot. So essentially what you need to do is a buttload of calf raises on with your knee extended, so straight knee, okay, and really dropping your heel down, getting a big stretch in the heel, a minimum of 100. Like you need to be doing up to sets of 100, like a lot. Okay, then you need to do the same thing, but with your knee slightly bent. Okay, and then what you want to do is train those different ranges there. So if you're dropping your heel all the way down, you're going to get dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. So you're going to work through that hinge joint there of the tibia and the talus. All right. And then if you're doing your calf raises where you put your weight onto your big toe, all right, onto your big toe, so you create eversion and put your weight onto your little toe, create inversion. So then you start to get the rolling. And then you do it in slightly different positions. So foot slightly wider than hips and feet together. You will start to get the kind of the abduction and adduction as the ankle is starting to navigate this position. And then once you've done all that, you start to challenge it in different kind of positions where you're coming up into single leg stance work or unstable surfaces, just to challenge this whole mechanism. So neurologically, it has reactivity. So it's all proprioceptive capacity. So we can respond to different positions, because the whole point of this ankle is it's a triplanar movement, right? So it's moving in forward and backwards, side to side roll and rotation. So when you stand on an uneven surface, the foot will roll around, and to maintain proper biomechanical alignment and center of gravity, so you don't fall over. Okay. So when you weight bear onto your foot, your center of gravity is going to shift across. So your hips are actually going to shift across a little bit and put the weight of your body down through the center of the foot. Okay. And that's what all walking and kind of running is going to be about. Right. So if you don't have this really well trained, then when the foot lands and it finds an uneven surface, it doesn't know what to do. Okay. And that throws off your balance. And then the knee and the hip or the lower back has to work a lot harder to try to keep you upright so you don't fall over. So the number one rule in walking and gait is that the body's trying to keep you upright and safe so you don't trip over and don't fall over, because then that's not very functional. So when you take movement from that perspective, what you want to optimize is this whole complex to really train it so it gets used to navigating uneven surfaces. So for example, today I went for a run on the beach. It was awesome. about a 20-minute run on the beach, just along, where the water comes up onto the edge of the sand, and it's on a slight slope. And we had a big storm last night, and the sand itself was fairly uneven, a lot of spaces. And there's just a little bit of water coming up, and then at the edge of the sand line, there were some big kind of potholes in there. And I was running along, and a group of people coming towards me, but they decided they weren't going to make any movement, and I was on the edge of the water, so I kind of had to run into the water a little bit to get around this group of people, and I kind of tried to find by a little navigation of a route through the water, and I missed one step, and it was deeper than I thought, and so I kind of landed a little bit, and kind of a little bit jarring, but because I do a lot of yoga, a lot of Tai Chi and Qigong, where we do a lot of balance work, my body was able just to kind of adapt to it, and I kept running. And the whole run was just running on uneven surfaces in the sand and back, which is amazing for kind of training this whole mechanism. So once a week, I try to get on the beach and do a sand run, just because one, it's amazing, you're in nature and running on the beach, and it's beautiful, and it feels cool. And then two, it's just really good to train the proprioceptive system in the body as well. And thirdly, you're earthing and you're grounding while you're running. So you're absorbing all these free electrons from the ocean and from the sand, because the foot has a kind of sweat glands in the feet where you can actually absorb bioelectricity from the earth. So you can kind of get recharge while you're training, which is super cool. But I digress. That's probably a video for another time. Okay, so anyway, that's the ankle and the foot and the calf. If you have any questions about how to get this bad boy rolling again, okay, please feel free to reach out. I do offer one-on-one consultations, either in face-to-face if you're in Australia and in New South Wales, or of course I offer telehealth. A lot of this stuff, once we have it assessed, we can kind of then start to rebuild the foot and the ankle. And if you're keen, we do a whole posture. Okay. And when you do a whole posture retraining program, and you take movement as the goal, not trying to hit a specific weight or anything like that, where you're just trying to optimize movement, then you get rid of all these injuries and the niggles and pains, because you're actually training how the body's meant to work. And so all the forces distributed evenly, tissue structures adapt to proper mechanics, and then after a while, things just feel really good. And if you've ever been in pain for a long time, being in pain sucks, particularly chronic pain. And if it's posturally, if your posture is a root cause of that pain, just know that it's very fixable. You do need to do a lot of work. You need to be very consistent with it. But what's more important to you, being in chronic pain, or spending an hour a day working on movement quality so that you can be out of chronic pain? That's an individual choice. I'm not here to judge, I'm just here to help. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. Don't remember to like, share, and subscribe. As always, feed the YouTube algorithm, and I will see you in the next video. That completes our lower limb, and I believe we'll be moving up to the upper extremity. We're looking at the shoulder girdle next, which is a whole ball cake in itself. All right, we'll see you then.